conclusion on that one was, does it really significantly reduce risk? Probably not. So far I'm not too keen on this idea of it being a really great thing. You know, not so much that it would overcome this great psychological, you know, thing with the public of we're going to send people out there and just leave them. And then the next thing I took a look at was I said, okay, in my mind, the risk assessment, the biggest risk really centers around Mars entry, descent, and landing. You heard it the other night when you heard Steve Squires talking about putting the murders down. You saw the mission guys, you know, it's the, whatever you want to call it, 6-7 minutes of sheer terror on every Mars mission when you're going in. Okay, and it doesn't get any better as you get bigger. Okay, when we start talking about these kind of missions, we're scaling up from where we've been with these things, and of course, airbags only worked up to a point. Now we're going to MSL. We're going back away. We're going to propulsive landing again. Which, yay, Aerojet, we're going to do that for you. But with the aeroshells, it gets to be a big problem, and you get to start looking at going from about 2 metric tons up to something like, you know, tens of metric tons. We're not even sure we know how to do it. Okay, the whole little scenario that you see down here of, you know, the parachute, first the aeroshell, you know, the supersonic, hypersonic really coming into Mars, the parachutes, and then the propulsive landing works fine up to a point, but we're really shingling out over the fog now, folks. When we start talking 10+ metric tons, it's a very different atmosphere than what we're used to dealing with. So that's a big risk item. And I mentioned on here that Design Reference Mission 3.0 had chunks of stuff that were going to be brought down that were about 60 metric tons. So just to recap, why would anybody propose this crazy idea of a one-wing mission? The biggest thing I see is it's the barrier to entry. We really think, and all have, that Mars was the next logical step beyond Apollo, starting back in '72. Yet, we haven't gone. We got loads of paper and no mission. Okay, so what we all want is to move beyond plans to action. We want to see people on Mars in our lifetimes. So this seems to be a way of removing some of the obstacles, and that's why these guys are looking at it. And they believe that this psychological impediment of sending people one way is not something that's insurmountable. That there's plenty of people out there who volunteer to do it. Probably some people in the audience today who volunteer to do that. Anyway, what I'd like to do now, and I know I'm keeping you from lunch, is talk about the reason that, oh, I forgot, my mentor. I meant to throw this in. The idea of lots of paper and still no missions. This was a quote I had to put in. Bob Sackheim, bless his heart, he came up with this a few years ago, and it's been true in my 20+ years in the business. We're constantly doing studies and studies and studies of new launch vehicles because we get to these very ambitious missions, and we figure the only way we can ever do them is to design some great new launch vehicle. But now I'd like to shift to something completely different. And those of you who are Monty Python fans will recognize the lumberjack skit. I'd like to talk about an alternative architecture to break down those barriers. And what I'd like to talk to you about is something that I wrote a paper on in 1988. In 1988, we thought we could do this, but we had a lot of technology challenges. I was working on something called MD thruster in those days, and that's what this guy was. But the idea is nuclear power plant, that's a radiator, just a big truss, something like a space station truss. And on the other end, you've got this electric propulsion with some very small tanks. That's the advantage of electric propulsion. You don't need big propellant tanks. But the really neat thing, and the thing I'll just point out with my little red marker here, is each one of these are individual payloads with individual aeroshells. You can break that payload up now. You don't have to do it all in one big lump thing. So remember my comment earlier on EDL. Okay, now we start to come back down closer to what we're used to. You can haul other stuff out too. You can haul stuff that doesn't have to go down to the surface. You can have some habitat modules and things like that. And you make this thing so it's reusable. Of course, if you put all this investment into this, it's going to go back and forth. So you're starting to set up something like the railroad. And, last point on this one, it also still keeps open that option for crew return, something I just couldn't let that go. So I'd like to tell you I'm a smart guy, and this has been my idea and all that. But the thought was, okay, so if this is so great, how come nobody's ever thought of this? Well, in the fact column here, the answer is yes, they have many times. 1957, before I was born, Walt Disney, Ernst Stuhlinger, and Werner von Braun actually consulted on this movie. Made a movie about going to Mars using these big electric-propelled spaceships, and you can see the classic old rocket here that was their Mars descent and ascent vehicle slung underneath the electric ship that was going to go out to Mars. The Russians, many times, have looked at nuclear electric propulsion for going to Mars. In fact, when I was working for the Air Force in the early 80s, we had all kinds of intel on it. It was real exciting stuff. That's how we got some of our funding for the MPD thruster. The Russians are working on it. We got to go do it too. And then this is just another JPL study that was done in 1991. But again, all throughout, it was a great idea on paper, but we had some technology challenges. So what's changed since 1988? Well, start off, here we are in 1988. There's me with my MPD thruster. We're flying shuttles in '88. We had a reusable kind of launch vehicle that could get good payloads up. We had a space station design on the drawing board that was going to have something called a dual keel, and up here you had a hangar. The idea of this is you could do some assembly in orbit. You could put pieces of spacecraft together in orbit that you could send on out. At the time, we didn't have this in a high inclination orbit either. That was yet to be decided. And we also had something here that was kind of interesting. Instead of just photovoltaics, we had solar concentrators with Stirling power generation. So a number of different technologies that didn't all manifest themselves that way. And then here's our little Saturn ring rover mission with, again, nuclear electric. There's the nuclear reactor and the electric thrusters. So these ideas were there in 1988. Something happened that really significantly changed things. One thing in particular was the Hall wall. When the wall came down, a technology that we didn't know that much about, called Hall thrusters, became available to us in the West. And there's a couple pictures here. This is actually one that we've recently built and tested at Aerojet that is a 50 kilowatt class Hall thruster. 50 kilowatts of power through a single thruster, and then that's the thruster firing up there. Something else has happened over that intervening time. Commercial people have developed very high-powered satellites that are now over our heads in orbit. These are a couple examples of ComSats that are now up to 25 kilowatts. They're working their way up toward 50 kilowatt power sources, all from solar panels. And these use electric propulsion routinely now. We've got something like 200 electric thrusters flying on ComSats right now today. And that's been over the period between like 1983 till today. We've eventually crept up on that type of target. We've also proposed and looked at, again, the idea of a nuclear electric system. This was JIMO back in the early days of the exploration program, the Project Prometheus. This got a little ways along and then got sidetracked when the decision was made on Constellation to focus on some more near-term things. And we built a space station, which has something like 70 kilowatts of power. So a number of power technologies have been just significantly advanced in the intervening time frame. We're getting better and better at this stuff. And the implications for the mission design of the Hall thruster and the power technology are that now we know how to do it. And what I wrote in 1988, it was all pretty conceptual. I had a laboratory thruster. I didn't have a power distribution system that would really work. All those programs that I showed you just on those previous pages have been working on that technology, and it's there. I mean, it's flight-type technology now. We're in a scale-up mode. We're not quite to a megawatt level, but we could get there. So that, and something I came across when I was getting ready for this talk, there was a 1988 study done by NASA's Office of Exploration that really intrigued me. It's got an excellent overview of mission options. It takes a look at lunar and what you can do with, I said ISS, it would be a space station. The only thing about it is, again, the technology status assessment's a little bit dated. They were looking at argon ion engines and things like that. that.